We're well inside 2022 now, and the fear for this year in whisky, if you're an enthusiast, you looked ahead and you were worried about pricing. Well, was that founded? Is the prices increasing? Do they continue to increase? Well, actually, yes and no. It depends on where you look and what category of whisky that you're after. But definitely, there are some price increases to concern us. So what do we do about it? We're going to take a deep dive into a category that I consider the sweet spot of Scotch whisky and have a look at what's still available and what is still affordable. I'll see you in a second. Hello, whisky folk. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thursday night. So good to be here with you again. So good to see so many of you waiting patiently for me to get things going again as we start to crank up the new year, as we often do, and start to talk about pricing and value and finding value in whisky. It's something that we like to do, and we're always much more better at it when we do it as a community, don't you think? Wonderful to welcome you all in. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're comfortable. I'm going to try to jump into the lounge quite early tonight and then just get the welcomes out of the way and then just get right into it. It's a solo session tonight. It's just me. I didn't even schedule any as a Speyside for this evening. I just forgot. It wasn't until today I remembered, and I went, oh, well, there's no one playing Is It a Speyside? If there's anybody that's really adamant that they'd like to play tonight and you're set up, you're in front of a camera and a mic and you'd like to come on, try and get my attention in the chat and we'll see if we can sort something out. But no matter, it will be something that's going to feature throughout the start of the year. You seem to have had fun playing a wee game of Is It a Speyside, and I've certainly had fun inviting guests on and having you on. Hey, let's jump into the lounge and see how all you beautiful whisky folk and dedicated barflies are doing. Danny Hebbington is here. Good evening, Barflies. Good evening, Roy. Good to see you, Danny. Whiskey Hog, that looks like a new name, Whiskey Hog. Welcome. He's saying greetings all. Nice to have you here. Oscari Kansanen, hello all. First live vPub for me ever. Oscari, it's very nice to have caught your name and welcome. Take a seat. I hope you enjoy yourself, my friend. Doc is here, my friend Doc from Germany. Macallan Fine and Rare, good to see you, buddy. Hellswood is here as well. Superb. Helen and Doc are both moderators tonight. So if you're struggling to get my attention for something very specific, they can maybe help. Nice to see you all in. Jan-Paul Vanderhoven, good to see Jan Paul. Tom Scaramuzza. Tom, fantastic. I enjoyed a sample from you. Absolutely delicious Springbank 8-year-old. It was fantastic. Luna Aaron, Mike Molasses, Whiskey Lovers Society, Malt Brother Ray. That looks like another new name, Malt Brother Ray. Welcome in. Peathead Frank, tremendous. Frank, good to see you, buddy. Roy, good to see you on your own vPub. And good to see you too, Frank. Ross Brereton, sorry, and good to see you, Ross. Whiskey Weekend, Dram Harrow, fantastic. Gerben Blocher, Thomas Elmer. Good to see you, Tom. Max Kreitner, Yash Desai, Loch Ness. Good to see you, Loch Ness. It's been a wee while, my friend. I hope you're keeping well. Jimmy Jazz is here. Whiskey Throttle Daniel, fantastic. Tim, Donnerpass Whiskey, who's coming to Scotland in May. Fantastic, Tim. Peathead, sorry, Frank already mentioned you. I've just jumped as somebody bought a chat there. I'll try and wind back up. John McAllister, good to see you, John. Ian Bowes, Glenn Vore, what's this channel? Jason, good to see you in, buddy. I hope you're keeping well. Nice of you to join us this evening. Martin Baker, that looks like, no, I think, Martin, I've welcomed you before. I hope I have. If not, welcome tonight, my friend. So many of you and lots of people trying to get my attention. Robert Fredrickson is saying, hello, evening, Aquavita and all. Barflies, looking forward to this evening too. I'm looking forward to it as well, Robert. Thanks for joining us. Multi-mission, that's Men on Belgium is here. Eric Waite Whiskey, Eric from California, so good to see you. And the sweet spot for Scotch whisky is my belly. I would agree with that sentiment. Spending a wee bit of time on the palate first, a wee bit of time in the glass to appreciate it, of course, but I get in my belly. Fantastic. Good to see you, Eric. Kilco O'Brien is in as well. Good to see you, Brian. Glennis Maid has bought me a wee dram. Hey, Roy, first, thanks for all the content. Got my first trip to Isla in April. Terrific stuff. And can't wait. Sadly, no drams tonight. Damn, stomach bugs. Oh, no. I hope you get better soon. And I'm sure you'll be in rude health for the trip over to Isla in the spring. That sounds amazing, my friend. Welcome in. I did miss a dram. Let's scroll back up. Ian Bose bought me a dram. Oh, wow, a generous dram. Ian, thank you very much. Time to show my appreciation, says Ian, with a few drams. Caring for a sick relative for part of last year was stressful. Having a few things to look forward to each week, especially the vPub, was very important. Ian, thanks very much for your kind words. I hope that the sick relative is on the mend. I hope that things are better for you, my friend. It's very generous of you to buy me a dram and think about me and us. Cheers, Ian. Slanchuva. I have a 15-year-old in the glass. Aaron Edgerton is in. Good morning, Roy, from Brisbane, Australia. Good morning to you, Aaron. Nice to have you here. And Justin Maltmonk is here saying, finally managing to catch the vPub live. Good to have you in, Justin. Very glad to see you here, buddy. The Hogsheads, another new name saying, Aquavite, good evening. Welcome in. The Hogsheads, fantastic, very good whiskey name too. Jimmy Legg is saying, hi, Roy, happy to see you solo tonight. Jimmy, thank you so much. It means a lot to me when you say that. Things are kind of getting back to some kind of new normal. And I guess that I haven't really been motivated as I was last year to schedule guests way in advance. So we're back to that situation now where if there are particular guests that you are interested in, that you would like me to reach out to and connect with in order to bring them behind the vPub, all I'll ask you to consider is that it might be that it's your favorite distillery or your favorite character or producer, whatever it is, but there has to be something of value to share with the community. You know, it's not just kind of talking about, oh, this is our 15-year-old, this is our 18-year-old and things. It's you want to kind of get some insight, some interesting angles on things. So if you do think that there's somebody out there that's going to be quite interesting, reach out to me and let me know who you would like to see on the vPub and also what topics that you'd like to see covered. I'm not short of topics. There's plenty of topics on the list going forward, and a lot of them will demand a good, informative and interesting guest. But that's not to say that I'm closed to topics that you guys would like to hear about as well. I have fun talking about whiskey. I think this is obvious to a lot of folk now. I hope it is. Chris Pollock is saying, still waiting for Dave Broom. I need to chase that down, actually. There was a book coming out. We talked about it. I need to give that a wee nudge and see what happens, Chris. Watchman999 is saying, you need to interview your wife on a vPub. I did, buddy. I did. Is that Greg? Is Watchman999 Greg? I keep forgetting your name. I did do that on a vPub lock-in for patrons. I didn't interview her. She just kind of came on and talked about being a whiskey widow, I think. No, she didn't. But she just, she talked about stuff and her role in all of this and things. And it was quite a nice wee night we had. I'm not sure I would convince her to go on a public stream. So you'll have to bully her directly. Time for a dram. Gregor is here. Start with the oldest dogs in the industry, Roy, and work back for guests. It makes a lot of sense. People like Dennis Malcolm would be a great guest, and he's 60 years in the industry now as well. He's going to be looking to the horizon. I don't know how you feel about Richard Patterson and the people like that. People like these guys, the old guard, have been around for a long, long time. People like Dave Stewart. I mean, a lot of these guys maybe would have no interest in appearing anywhere near this environment. But I think they would end up having fun. They normally have fun doing it. I have not had anybody that's not had fun. Jimmy Legacy and Kresimir is here. It's Aquavite. So we have the Sniper King in from Croatia tonight. Fantastic, Kresimir. I hope you're doing very well. Fantastic. So, I don't know how many we've got. We're approaching about 300 in just now. I'm going to do something tonight, and I know that this guy isn't in tonight, but he's going to probably pick it up in the replay. I want us all to make a hell of a big, big noise. I want us to celebrate something. I want to congratulate somebody because I met a friend through this channel. He's become a very good friend. I have a lot of time and respect for him. I think he's one of the classiest, most calm, pragmatic guys that I've come across in whiskey. I like hearing his opinions. I like hanging out and talking to him. But today, this very day, 27th of January, 2022, he's turning 50 years old. I'm talking about my friend Scott Monroe. You know him as Kilted Moose, Scott Monroe, one of the Bottlechasers, and he's been on the channel so many times. So can we all just raise a glass together and say many happy returns on your 50th birthday, big guy. It's been a pleasure to call you a friend in recent years, and I hope that you've got a terrific weekend ahead planned. I'm looking forward to catching up with you next week. We've got a nice wee card from the other Bottlechasers to hand over to you. Scott Monroe, happy birthday, my friend. Cheers. A wee dram's come in from David Hong. David, so good to see you, my friend. Thanks for the dram. He's saying congrats on 20k subs, Roy. Thank you very, very much, David Hong. It's quite amazing. 20,000 people. A channel that's mostly built on live streams. Still trying to get the recycled review recorded. The whiskey bottles are still waiting there, but you can look forward to in the next week or so. As soon as I get a wee pocket of time, a new recycled review dropping as well. Thanks, David. Jimmy Leggett saying, hurrah, fantastic moose. And McCallum Final Rare said, I keep saying Annabelle Thomas from McNean is a great lady to talk about everything in whiskey. I connected with Annabelle last year. Was it last year? Yeah, I think it was early last year. And she was leaving to go on maternity leave. So maybe that's, I maybe need to do a wee revisit there and see if I think Annabelle would be a fantastic guest, and she's got a fantastic tale to tell there as well with Nick Nean. Terrific stuff. And Nick Keane is saying, if you could get Ian MacArthur on, I'd be ecstatic. Now, there's a character that would be very, very interesting, and he'd be great fun to talk to. But I think Ian is, I think he likes to keep himself to himself. Ian MacArthur, obviously from Lagavulin, Nick's talking about. Whiskey 101, Nick is in saying Stuart McPherson, Master of Wood at Macallan, is a good guest. We can all get really geeky about the cask discussion. He knows so much. That's a decent shout. I've never met or spoken to. I don't really know much about Stuart. Nick, thank you. Sandra Fazzolari saying, what about cousin Kevin Grant as a co-hosting guest? That might be a nice one. It's been a while since Kevin's been on. Middle of last year, I think. He's not been on in quite a wee while. Leanne is saying, Leanne, Scotch in the Bayou is in. Fantastic. Good to see you. GG UK is in as well. Good to see you, GG. GG UK. Drew from Arizona is in. Good to see you, Drew. I was looking out for your name. Good to welcome you in always, buddy. And George Ellis saying, yes, please, recycled reviews need to update my spreadsheet. Okay. We're probably 15 minutes in already or something, are we? Let's get the topic on the go. There's over 300 of you in, and we want to talk about the crunchy topic, don't we? We want to talk about this issue of price. There's been a few things that's kind of made this ever more of a topic, ever present, kind of ominous cloud on the horizon, let's say. And that is because we can all kind of touch whiskies that we know and have come to love that have slipped out of our reach a wee bit on price. Or if they've not slipped out of our reach, they've certainly meant that it's more of a pause before we buy them now because the price is that wee bit more expensive. And there are lots and lots of examples of that. Of course, there is. Some of them we'll touch on tonight. But you might remember, as we did the look ahead to 2022 a couple of weeks ago with Ingvar Ronde on, that he made a very interesting point that he'd actually been doing some number crunching and studying. And for the most part, there were not much of an increment. It was very, very incremental, the increases in price since 2016. He went all the way back to 2016, and he was checking certain prices and in his own domestic market of Sweden. Admittedly, the caveat is that. But he noted that over the course of that 6-year span, it was only 3-4%, very small price increases, until you went over 12 years old. That's the exact same as my findings. I've been playing around. I've not been doing anything scientific. I've just been putting numbers into a spreadsheet. And if you look at 12-year-old whiskies and under, you know, the standard kind of entry-level product, either the non-age statements, the 10-year-olds, the 12-year-olds, whiskies of that order, not only are you seeing them static on price, more or less, but you're seeing often they will drop to a reduced price. A flash sale or £5 off or 10% off or 20% off, whatever it may be, seems to be a bit of a room at that age to offer special prices and things. And even if there has been price increases, you know, it's kind of £34 to £38, but then it'll suddenly go on offer for 32 or 30 or things like that. So I get the sense that I'm seeing the same thing that Ingvar saw. On entry-level product, we tend to see fairly incremental increases on price. As soon as you go higher than that, as soon as you get into the 14, 15, 16-year-old, what I would refer to as the sweet spot, which is the topic for tonight, you start to see, yes, significant 10, 12, 15% price hikes, much higher. And then if you go into 18, 20, 21-year-old, much higher again. So we can comment on that. We can talk about it. We can say, oh, what's the reason for that? And we can complain and we can have a moan about it. But we can only stress about the things that we can control. The only thing that we can control is where we put our money. So do we put our money in just more and more of it against our favourite whiskies? Or do we learn to be a bit more open-minded, a bit more adaptable, a bit more promiscuous, and a bit less loyal to labels, and say, no, it's got a bit expensive now. I'm going to see what else I can spend my money on. And I think that's the way we need to do this. And that way we can always be looking for the value rather than just blindly following what we believe to be our favourite whiskies, right? So that's kind of what I'm going to do tonight. I was prepping for this a couple of weeks ago, and I have to be honest, it was tough to find examples that I wanted to bring to you and hold up high and say, this is interesting. But there were some still things that I would be happy to recommend to you, things that I would be very happy to have on the shelf, to the point that I bought it myself. Doc is saying, Aquavita, it's been interesting to watch. The threshold of dramatic price increases went down over the years. 21-year-old, then 18-year-old, then 16-year-old, now 15-year-old. That's exactly the issue we're seeing, Doc. So I want to ask this to everybody. Why do you think that is? I do not think it's got anything to do with the amount of cost involved in maturing that whiskey. I really don't. I just don't. The cost per litre, per annum, to mature whiskey is in the low pence. It's pennies. It's very, very small. Now, let's not dismiss it that easily. There has to be significant investment put in. There has to be a structure, a model in place in order to lay down whiskey, all of these things. And it has to be managed and cask managed over the years and all of these things. And the more you manage it and the better you get at looking after the product with the best of wood, the best of environments, the best of admin and care, the more expensive it becomes, absolutely. But I'm going to talk about a couple of examples tonight to suggest to you that there are only certain amount of producers that have product 10 years and older, let's be honest. There are lots and lots of product out there that's much younger than 10 years, whether it's from an increase in capacity, an increase in production, or a new distillery that's come on stream. There's lots of young whiskey out there, but it's maturing. And year by year, we're in 2022 now. And this expansion started more than 15 years ago. So there's going to be lots more of it becoming available. So now that we're at that point, as Doc mentioned there, where we're talking about a 15-year-old sweet spot of whiskey, where is all this mature stock? And why are the prices becoming higher and higher? And I'm a wee bit nervous. And until somebody tells me that I'm wrong, I think it's got a lot to do with pricing to what the market will stand, rather than what it's actually cost for them to put that whiskey out there and make a profit on it. Famously, we were able to buy Lagavulin 16 for, in Europe, 50 euros, 55 euros, that price. In the UK, 50 to 55 pounds, maybe up to 60 pounds. But now, not that you can buy it easily, it's sold out for about 70 pounds. Huge bump in price recently. On top of that, there was lots of social media fire at the turn of the year. Maybe you caught the circular that was going around talking about the bump in price on Talisker 10, Lagavulin 16, and a huge 200% plus increase on Talisker 18. Now, this didn't come from any official sources. I didn't get it firsthand from an official source, and I didn't chase it down. Why? Because I don't care. I don't care. I can only worry about the things I can control. And if Diageo decide that they want to put Lagavulin 16 up by a ridiculous 40% or whatever it was, Talisker 10 up by the same margin, and 200% onto the price of Talisker 18, carry on and do that. Because there are millions of choices out there. It just means that the Talisker 18s and the Lagavulins, and they're for other people that can afford it or can afford to buy these things and not care how much they cost. We've got lots of choice. I don't know if you saw that circular, but I decided not to comment on it much because I didn't believe that it was that true. Gordon Fraser is saying aquavitae is because the big guys are seeing how much we are willing to pay for young, new distillery whiskies, in my opinion. That would be cynical and unfair and stupid, because the new distilleries are starting out and they have to sell these new young whiskies at a higher price. Okay, they do, but they know that the year-on-year cost of maturing that whiskey per litre per bottle is not going to be that high. And most of them are committing to the point where they're saying, yeah, we're launching at £45, £50, whatever it may be. But when we bring you a mature whiskey that's going to be 7 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, it's still going to be the same price point. This is the cost of making the whiskey and putting all of these resources in this place in order to do it. Mark Rainey himself stood in front of me and a group of people in a tasting at the end of last year and made that very statement. Our whiskey is expensive. Please understand what we are trying to do here and know that our price will stay the same. It's not going to be incrementally higher year after year after year. Now, I can't vouch for that. We just have to trust it, right? But I'm getting the same message from other producers who are producing new whiskey. And if you look at releases, whether you look at Lindors or you look at Kingsbarns or you look at Ardnamurchan or any of these, the prices have stayed the same for the entry-level product. It's roughly the same. And that kind of backs up my argument that they're looking ahead and they realize that, yes, it's expensive to store and mature all of these whiskies and build the warehouse space and everything. But when you break it down per litre, per bottle, the cost is very, very small in comparison to everything else. Falsgraf is saying, storing costs in an existing warehouse stay constant. Acquiring grounds and building new warehouses, absolutely, absolutely, Falsgraf. It may be expensive, but they will last. So storing should not be a big factor. Horst Luning is constantly talking about this issue, saying that actually the cost of maturation is not that high. If Diageo can make the fine profit on Lagavulin 16 going for 60 to 70 euro, selling it for 100 euro comes down to one thing, just because they can. I would agree, and I would say that that's exactly what's happening here. I was a wee bit annoyed at somebody that I look up to greatly in whiskey, and that is Sukhinder Singh. He's one of the most canny people out there in whiskey. His knowledge and his passion for it, what he's been able to achieve is amazing. But you've got Sukhinder Singh kind of standing up and saying Lagavulin 16 is too cheap. This was over a year ago, by the way, but he's standing up there and saying Lagavulin 16 is too cheap. The only people that would say Lagavulin 16 is too cheap are probably the people who make it and a retailer who sells it, because it potentially makes other things look difficult to sell because of that age statement on there. There's a 16-year-old whiskey for £55. Why is there nothing else on the shelf at the same price point for the same age, especially with the reputation that Lagavulin has? Now, don't tell me that Diageo were not making a profit selling Lagavulin 16 at £55. Of course they were, and I'm going to prove to you tonight that they were. A Whiskey Bond Mark is in saying it's a secondary market. There's more flippers than sippers. No other market has seen price increases like this recently. I wonder how you feel, Mark, whether you agree with my theory that if there are more flippers than sippers, the glass Loch is becoming a bigger factor annually. So people are looking at these prices swelling and increasing, and it's only headed in one direction, and it's going to hit the buffers eventually. And the buffers will be when that glass Loch starts to make its way back onto the secondary market in bulk, en masse, and starts to compete with the inflated and bloated primary market. It's inevitable. The population is not growing. Whiskey drinkers are growing, we hope. But there's a migration. The drinkers are declining. The sippers, the appreciators, the enthusiasts are growing. Premium sector is growing. The entry-level sector is pretty flat, despite that being where the volume is, of course. Sandro is saying a Lagavulin 16 in Italy is now €95. Remarkable. Doc is saying, as a pricing professional, I can tell you that prices are typically not cost-based, but absolutely, Doc is saying, but willingness as to what people will spend. I missed you. Jump down. Well, I'm way behind in the chat, but willingness to pay based today. Exactly what we're talking about. Donald Rance is in saying Lagavulin 16's average price in Canada is now $155. Crazy. Well, I've got my last bottle of Lagavulin 16 here, and it's open. It's not sealed anymore. I opened it at vPub recently, you might remember, and I owe a great debt to Lagavulin 16. This is absolutely the whiskey that changed me from being somebody who just enjoyed whiskey socially and thought it was quite a nice thing, an interesting thing. But Lagavulin 16 drove me into geek territory. That was way back in 2009 when I first encountered a bottle of Lagavulin 16, and I've loved it ever since. I still love it now. And I have to be honest with you, if this gets to the bottom, I'm still in a position where I would maybe consider paying £70 to have it back on the shelf again. But I have a huge emotional investment in it. And it detracts from my enjoyment of that whiskey that I'm paying so much more for it. I understand incremental kind of organic price increases over time, but what we've seen is bump, and that's jarring. That's difficult. It's not like the Diageo have suddenly looked at their Talisker 10, their Lagavulin 16 and their Talisker 18 and went, oh, we don't have any stock. Wow, oh my goodness, this is now rare. This is, they're managing down to a cask level now. They really know exactly what stock, and they're planning years in advance. If you're going to sell an 18-year-old product, you need to be planning 18 years in advance. So the price is purely about, okay, this is the market price for this now, as Doc says. Absolutely, it's what the market will stand. So this is now seen as a £70 whiskey. Here is our stake in the sand for tonight, okay? This is the whiskey that we are going to use, and we are going to say, okay, Lagavulin, you've gotten a bit pricey now. What else is out there? Now, I'm not going to hang too much on profiles tonight or regions or what other Islas can we buy at this kind of age and things like that. This has been a unique product for a long time, a 16-year-old Isla product for the price point. Absolutely, it's been unique. It's difficult to find things to compete with it easily. Bowmore's got a 15-year-old that doesn't compete with this, honestly speaking. There are a couple others out there, but they tend, at that age, they tend to make this look very good value. So, okay, let's hold this up and say £70 for Lagavulin. That's what it's going to be. Everything else that I share with you tonight cannot be more expensive than this. And if it is more expensive than this, I have to talk about it and I have to justify it to you. But I think I've managed with the whiskies I'm going to share with you tonight in the sweet spot that they will all be cheaper than Lagavulin 16's new price point. Calamira is saying, sadly, those Diageo price increases have already been implemented for retailers purchasing in 2022. Well, hell mend you, Diageo. If those price points that were going round as a social media rumor at the end of 2021 have come to fruition and those huge step up increases have happened, it's not for us. Step away. There's loads of other whiskey, and there's more of it becoming mature and ready for sale year by year by year, like never before. There is no shortage of whiskey. So let's put our Lagavulin here. Let's just set it there. Just remind us that this £70, I didn't pay 70 for this, but if I want to replace that now, I'm paying £70 for it. It's interesting, Callum. The Lagavulin 16, of the three major online retailers in the UK, it's only available in stock at one of those three retailers. Talisker 10, similar story, low stocks everywhere, and Talisker 18 is sold out across all three outlets. So that release, that price hike coming out, meant that, similar to the bad news that we got about Glendronach a year ago, it meant that there was a huge sales spike. And unfortunately, I don't have, the ability to kind of, I understand that people are going to hoard their favourites. They're going to buy it at the cheaper price and they're going to keep it because they see that big price coming. But I would argue, no. Hold two fingers up to this practice, whether it's bad news about price or bad news about presentation or whatever it is, and just say, no, don't buy the product. Don't hoard it. Don't put it away. Just disengage. You're not short of choices. I'm going to try and keep it positive tonight. But it's tough. I know it's tough, and I feel it too. Everything that I share on this vPub, every bottle that you see, because of the support I have on Patreon, means that I buy it with my own money. They support me so that I can go out and buy the whiskey. That means I look at that bottle, and when I judge it for the amount of money that I've handed over for it. It's an emotional thing, and you feel it when you pay your own money for these whiskies. Doc is saying, rumour has it that Laga 16 will be premiumised and Laga 8 will be the entry product. We've already seen that. Laga 8 is £55 now. Still pricey for an 8-year-old. And in the UK, Doc, Lagavulin 16 is at £70. So we can already see that swinging in. And interestingly, Lagavulin 16 was actually cheaper than the 8-year-old when the 8-year-old launched, you might remember. Don't know if it was that in Europe, but we saw that happening here. You could still buy Lagavulin 16 in the 40s. And Lagavulin 8 came out at 50 plus. Whiskey Throttle is saying, we all need to vent, Roy. Let your John Wayne out. Well, I feel it, because if you do spend your own money, you do appreciate, you do think, you do process, this cost this much. Is it giving me that value? I'll tell you what I've been sipping so far. This is a wee bit more expensive than what I paid for it. I paid £49 for this. I think I must have got a deal on it or something like that. It's a wee bit more than that now. This is a Speyside, a Glen Grant 15-year-old. It was originally, I think, a travel retailer, or at least a North American exclusive. What's interesting about this Glen Grant is that not only do I think it's good value, similar age to the Lagavulin, doesn't have any kind of flavour profile to it at all. But, the cost of production is going to be in a similar ballpark, right? Similar age to mature it, 50% ABV, so there's a lot more whiskey in here. I paid $49 for this. If you want to pick up the Glen Grant 15 now, you would have to pay $59. Now, this is not going to be the best whiskey that you taste this year or last year or any year. This is probably going to be the best Glen Grant that you'll taste. Unless you go for a super sherried, very, very specific type of old Glen Grant, or, there's going to be lots of really fantastic Glen Grants out there. SMWS, for example, have released some cracking Glen Grants over the years. But if you go out and look at the official bottlings, even the 18, the 10, honestly, the only Glen Grant that I could recommend to anyone for years was the 5-year-old that's available widely across Europe. It was a tremendous product and very inexpensive too. Until this 15-year-old came along, and I thought, okay, now there's a real value proposition from Glen Grant. And you can see I've enjoyed sharing this out. I've enjoyed sharing it to somebody. It's such a quintessential Speysider. At first, it's got that lovely kind of apple crisp, sweet note about it. It's got the oak and the vanillas on the palate, but you spend a wee bit of time with it, and the white pepper comes across, a bit of spice. The extra ABV brings grip that you don't normally get in a Glen Grant. The floral thing is still there, but it's mixed into more of a potpourri and wood spice thing. Sandalwood, that kind of thing. This is a good Glen Grant. Now, I'm not going to say that this is the best whiskey I'm going to share with you tonight. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that there's going to be a better one. But this is an indication that things are moving in a more promising direction. And hopefully I've got more examples of that tonight as well. Still considerably less than that bottle of Isla's famous ambassador over there. Lunaran saying, Eric Waite had a great idea of Whiskey Tube. Stop recommending bottles over €100 or dollars. I think that's a bad idea. Here's what I think, Luna. We can't decide from our individual place how much somebody's going to spend on a bottle of whiskey. We can't say, no, I'm not going to talk about that, like it doesn't exist. It's our job to talk about it, but frame it. Understand that if your sweet spot is going to be 15, 16-year-old whiskies, and you're not going to want to pay much more than £60, £65 for it. We talk about those. But we have to hold up the ones that are a bit more expensive and frame it and give it a reference and say, what you will get if you pay this money is this. And then help people understand if there's value in that at all. Now, I'm not, the vPub or this channel is not going to talk about, 30-year-old whiskies and expensive 25-year-old whiskies and super premium stuff. It's just not that relevant. Occasionally we'll throw the boat out and we'll do a celebration whiskies vPub like we did a wee while back. But remember, I was trying to keep it around that £100 mark. And if things are going to creep higher than that, we need to either justify the price or talk about why it's too expensive for the experience. But somebody's $100 is not the same as someone else's $100 or pounds or euros or whatever it may be. And you don't want to start making people feel like they're being, I don't know, everybody's resources are different is my point. What we need to focus on is not the cost in euros, dollars or pounds, but the value. Perfect example is £60, £64 now for Glenturret's 12-year-old. That's far too expensive for a 12-year-old product. You can't judge it as a 12-year-old product. You have to enjoy it as a £60 to £64 product. And then it's tough to find anything to compete with it. So it's about framing it. It's about giving it context and trying to, put a bit of meat on the bone so that people understand. Doc is saying, I'll keep repeating forever in my monthly blind tastings almost every single time. The second cheapest of 6 wins. Stop buying expensive stuff or buy and sit blind. It's the way to do it. Jimmy Legg is 392 people in Aquavitae. Wow. Well, we'll soon get rid of them. We'll soon bore them and they'll leave, Jimmy. As long as you stay here, buddy, that's great. Listen, if you're new here, welcome everybody. If you're picking it up on the replay, I'll be putting timestamps underneath as well, and we'll be able to skip ahead to the specific topics, hopefully, that we can talk about. Anyway, we'll put the Glen Grant off to the side, and we'll talk about how things are moving. Not all the time, but occasionally in a positive direction. I've enjoyed my time with the Glen Grant. Quintessential Speyside, 50% ABV makes it a decent value proposition as well. Glen Grant 15 on offer, $75 US, not my dram. For everybody, it's going to be different, George. If you like a Glen Grant, if you like the style, if you like a light, crisp Speysider, I think that's the first time you've heard me talking about a Glen Grant positively. Graham Fraser is saying, I'm sipping an independent bottle of cast strength 19-year-old Arran in Edinburgh tonight, as it's near to the Arran sweet spot as you can find. Yes, the Arran has that gap. Anok has that gap. There are quite a few producers out there that have a gap. Even Tomatin, they have their 14-year-old, but it's a Portwood. Where's your 15? Anok, when are we getting that 16 back? And Arran, you go from that the Arran 10-year-old. There are various other bits and pieces. The 14-year-old has long been discontinued, so you jump straight up to the 18. There's that huge kind of vacuum in there screaming for that delicious bourbon-forward 14-year-old to come back into the mix. Nick Gascoigne is saying there are some great value in the independent bottling market too. Whiskey Broker, Dramore, to name just 2. Dramore, fantastic value. Whiskey Broker, fantastic value. Absolutely. Some indies are getting a wee bit out of hand. Some indies are now more expensive, much more expensive in a lot of cases than the official bottling, whether they're trading on their own name or whatever it may be. But it tends to be a symptom of the cost of the casks these days. Whiskey prices are just going a bit nuts, and there are even idiots on YouTube screaming about how great whiskey is. So we don't help. We know we're all part of the problem, but we can all work together to find solutions to the problems when they come along. Lucas is saying there is a 15-year-old Tomatin ex-bourbon. Is there a Tomatin 15? Well, that's the one to use for my is it a Speyside? Because I think I would have a travel retail maybe. That would catch me out. That would have caught me out. I've got Tomatin 18, Tomatin 14, 12. Maybe it's a Maybe it's a travel retail, Lucas. I'm not sure. But regardless, yeah, I'm sure it does exist. But what we would like to see is a staple, a widely available core range to plug that gap. I think that gap exists in a few areas. And like I say, I do believe that it is the sweet spot where complexity, where maturity comes into the mix, where, you know, things have started to really mellow out and soften and become really quite delicious. The idea that something can mature for 14, 15, 16 years in a cold, damp, humid climate in Scotland and produce this wonderful whiskey. And please, if we're successful tonight, they're still affordable, or some of them are still affordable. So like I say, we're trying to keep things under the price of the Lagavulin. It's now at £70. I'm going to try to keep things under £60. So that Glen Grant now is still £60. I'm going to hold this up. There has been talk of this going up in price as well, but it's a moot point, because you try and buy Glen Scotia 15 now, it's gone, it's disappeared. People have worked out that they can't get their hands on Springbank, so they're moving to Glen Scotia now. I can imagine that the Victoriana is going to disappear pretty soon as well, but the 15 has already disappeared from shelves in the UK. Now, this was fantastic value, 15-year-old at 46% ABV. Unfortunately, this is still coloured, but we forgave it that because it was delicious and good value whiskey. £48 I paid for this. There are stories here and there, and through the retail side of things, the Glen Scotia 15 has had a big step change in price as well. Not sure what to expect there, but it's another one that's going to go to the Lagavulin side of things because the price is potentially bumped up. Interesting that the Lagavulin and the Glen Scotia are both still coloured whiskies. Now, the Glen Scotia gets a bump up in points because it's at least 46%, which means that they don't need to chill filter it, right? So if they're not chill filtering, should save them a wee bit of money. Don't go through that extra process. Don't filter your whiskies. Give us a few percent extra ABV. Don't filter it. You save yourself a wee bit of money that way. You can give us the whiskey. I don't know. I know it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. Let's look at two of my favourite 15-year-olds. And I'm going to open one. I'm going to uncork one tonight for you. One of them is almost gone. I've talked about this at length. This gets better as the bottle goes down. At first, you might sip this and think, oh, that's okay, it's just a nice whiskey. But as it goes on, this Speyburn 15 has been fantastic. Now, it's not the cheapest 15-year-old, but it's still well under £60. It's natural. It tells you on the label that it's natural. 15-year age statement, no added colour, non-chill filtered. Wonderful proposition. Love the stuff. Unfortunately, like the Glen Scotia 15, I'm struggling to buy this now. It's out of stock everywhere. But this was a fantastic discovery in 2021 that such a wonderfully complex, rich, delicious, difficult to reach past, honestly. I usually share most of my whiskies, but this bottle has mostly been enjoyed by me. One of my favourites of last year. I've talked about it at length on vPubs in the past. Some things are getting better. It goes on this side. Falsgraf is saying filtering costs will probably be cents or fractions of cents on a bottle. No doubt, Falsgraf. I'm very tongue-in-cheek. But what I do want to ask is, if you're going to fill a vat, which is going to be potentially thousands and thousands of bottles worth, a lot of liquid, and then you're going to take that room temperature liquid and you're going to drop it down to freezing before forcing it through the filters under high pressure, that's a lot of energy. So they would not only be saving a few cents per bottle, potentially, Falsgraf, but they would also be saving the planet as well and getting a wee bit closer to their emissions targets too. Don't chill filter whiskey. And if you don't chill filter malt whiskey, please. Teach people that it's okay for it to cloud. Anyway, this is the one. This is my producer of the year, Glencadam. This is a 50-year-old product. You can usually buy this less than £60. It's of that order. I think I paid 58 for this one. I know this whiskey. I know how it tastes. I'm going to have a wee dram with you. Listen to that. Poured a bit much, but neck pour, but immediately you've got the light, crisp sugar cubes and pineapple. underripe pineapple, some sort of hay and malt, an outdoor fresh linen thing, floral, creamy, biscuity creamy, maybe even like a plate of, I know it sounds horrible, but you'll get cold porridge, something that's kind of malty and creamy. Not a lot of spice, not a lot of ABV, very soft, very in check. Neck pour. Haven't even given it time to rest. So the spice comes, the fruit comes. It's like poached pear or booze-soaked sweet orchard fruit. The spice is like a very gentle white pepper, maybe something lightly spiced. The ABV is in check. This is 46% ABV, and a bit like that Speyburn I've just shown you here as well. Glencadam are putting it on the label in big, clear font to say, unchill filtered, no added colour, 46% ABV, 15 years old, less than £60. Ralphie made this his whiskey of the year a few years ago. Now, admittedly, he did it just before they ran out of stock. Glencadam was shuttered for a few years, which meant they genuinely ran out of stock and had to lose this. But to be fair to them, they brought it back. And they brought it back not expensive, competitively priced against their peers. And that's what we'll be judging the whiskies against tonight. You know my love for Glencadam? This will be a staple now. A 15-year-old natural product, less than £60, that's this good. There's nothing to talk about. The Hogshead just seen sipping the new non-chill filtered natural colour Royal Brackla 12. Some things do get better, right? As nice as it is, it definitely fits into the almost overly expensive new releases at £60. I agree, and that's what we talked about. So you're I think I paid about £55, £57 for the Royal Brackla 12. So it was expensive for a 12-year-old. So let me ask you this. If the option was the old Royal Brackla at 40% ABV, which was still a high £40 product, or the new one at close to £60 for natural presentation, and remember that it's sherry forward. It's not exclusively sherry cask matured, but it's sherry forward. So we always pay a bit more for that sherry forward experience. There's going to be a fantastic example of that later tonight. Ask yourself, how would you rather have it? The thin and watery old expression, or occasionally you'll spend a bit of money for a wonderfully rich sherry experience that's fully natural. I think there's nothing to talk about. I would much rather prefer it stay there. But what I don't want Royal Brackla to do, or Dewar's to do, is to bump that price up. It's already quite expensive. It's up at the upper end of what they can ask. We're allowing it because they're giving us a much more natural product. Daniel's saying, I've many bottles that are so-called YouTube influencers don't want to review because it wouldn't get them enough views, even when I've shared full bottles with them for free. But an overpriced bottle, I don't think many channels that I know of or collaborate with review whiskies based on how many views it will get. I think what we try to do, for the most part, the people I enjoy working with, the people I collaborate with, the people I support, they are trying to help you find whiskies that are good, or avoid whiskies that are not so good, or be realistic and pragmatic about average whiskies. They are just going along the same journey as most of us, Daniel, and I think they just happen upon the same bottles and just review whatever they happen upon. What might happen is that some channels, and this is rare, I'm struggling to even think of many examples, might be reviewing the whiskey that's given to them, and that gives them a bit less freedom of choice. So I know what you're saying, but I don't know of any channels that review for views. It's quite rare. Jaime is saying, got my Brackla 12 bottles new on offer for £27 each. Oh my goodness, Jaime, I don't know where you got Royal Brackla 12 for £27. That's incredible. Got 3 of them. Aye, I can imagine you would buy it up. And Ian Graham is saying, surely Glenallachie 15 is worthy of a mention at £62. Absolutely. Just a nudge over 60. It's a great whiskey. I've got one over there on the shelf. I'm not loving it. I think there needs to be a bit more grip and a bit more life about it. I think it's too cask reliant. I think it's quite linear and flat, but it's not a bad whiskey. In fact, it's a good whiskey, and people that I pour it for seem to absolutely love it. Not quite the engagement I want from a whiskey yet. Glenallachie 15 is good whiskey, and it's naturally presented and it's fairly priced. Glenallachie will get better. Every year it's going to get better. Whiskey Throttle is saying you are included in my comment. We can discuss some other time. You're not included in my comment. We can discuss some other time. And he's giving me a wee wink. No problem, Daniel. Having a wee dram with you would be amazing. And Reb is in. So good to see you, Reb. The Glencadam 15, my favourite Highlander fruitcake, brandy, sweet glazed oranges, marmalade, walnuts, and cinnamon butter toast. Orange chocolate. I'll give you the orange chocolate. Yeast cake. Yeast cake. I wonder if that's what the biscuity porridge thing. Burnt sugar on top. So there you go. Reb is in love with the Glencadam 15 as well. And how could you not be? This isn't an obvious bookend style of whiskey. This is often really quite subtle. So if you were pouring this for somebody who was new into whiskey, you would have to explain to them what they're sipping and talk about it a bit and contrast it with some other things like a peaty one or a sherried one. I get what you're talking about, Reb. The vanilla and the creme brulee, the sweet caramel. And just that light, gentle spice. Just no flaws, nothing to detract from just a lovely, easy whiskey experience. Dribs and Drams has bought me a wee dram. My last 3 reviews were Loch Lomond 12, Old Pulteney Huddart, and Annock Peat Heart. None got me massive views, but Tasty Juice for sure. Loch Lomond 12, 46%. Some things are getting better. Old Pulteney Huddart, not the entry level Old Pulteney. The 12 is the entry level. That Huddart is a better presented product despite being a non-age statement. And Annock Peat Heart. Well, we love Annock right now. The Peat Heart, it's not the one I would reach for Annock. I understand why Inverhouse are making a peated spirit at Knockdhu Distillery. It's not one that I would reach for, but I've not tried them all, and I've certainly not tried it recently. But again, he's just reviewing the whiskies that he's happening upon on his journey and sharing it with us. And I think that's what tends to happen on YouTube. Anyway, let's move on to the next whiskey. I'm going to keep these here, and I'm going to try to keep them in order. Here's my Glen Grant, so that will go on the left. And here's my Glencadam. It's going to go there. I poured too much of that Glencadam. Remember, after last week's vPub, I'm trying to keep tabs on what I'm actually sipping, right? I've got one to uncork here, and you've Dribs and Drams, thanks for your dram, but you've given me a perfect excuse to segue into this. But I'm going to pick one up. You mentioned Loch Lomond 12. There's also, just 2 years north of this, Loch Lomond have plugged the gap with this 14-year-old. Now, this is using some French Limousin in here as well. They write fruit and cinnamon across the label. I was all over the place trying to work out what the spice was in this. Then I read the label and I worked out, okay, I thought it was a bit more nutmeggy. This is a very, very good crowd pleaser. This is, if you like Arran 10, this is that kind of rich, okay, fruit and spice forward experience from Loch Lomond. But it's 46% ABV. I think they're still using a wee dot of colour. Loch Lomond are getting better year by year by year. They're kind of weaning themselves off older legacy practices and becoming much more natural as the years tick by. You can see that I've enjoyed my time with this and I've shared it out, and it's a very easy to enjoy malt whiskey with a bit of interest in it. A good crowd pleaser, like I say. This goes along the some things get better section. This one really qualifies for an ignored vPub. This is a distillery I used to love because of their entry-level 12-year-old used to be available everywhere for £20, £25 at the most you would pay for it. I'm going back a few years now, and to me it was lovely. They had premium releases available, a 17-year-old and a 21-year-old, and I never owned a 21-year-old myself. Oh no, that's not true. I did pick up one in the States in the end, but it was a Whiskey Rev that went out and bought the 21-year-old, and it was a terrific, terrific whiskey. I had the 17-year-old, and it was a terrific whiskey. Depending on the night that you sipped it, the 17-year-old was punching way above its weight and could often compete the 21, depending on mood and moment and things. Anyway, a few years ago, they rebranded and eventually they brought out a new range, and everybody, because of the bump in price, because it wasn't a price increase like this, it was a jarring step change of the price increase to match the rebranding. Of course, I'm talking about Old Pulteney. Now, Dribs and Drams was talking about the Hud Art here, which is the kind of second in line after the 12. There are a few others out there, a couple of non-age statements, travel retails and things, but generally the core range. This is mid-tier. This is their 15-year-old, which is 46% ABV. I've not had a look at the label, but I believe that they do put on here that it's unchill filtered. I might need to spend a bit of time looking for it. It would be nice if it was in big letters like the Glencadam and the Speyburn. Okay, if it is unchill filtered, they're a wee bit quiet about it. But I've got the box over there, so it probably tells me on the box. But I have not engaged with Old Pulteney in a hell of a long time. Old Pulteney, it's time I practice what I preach. Second uncorking tonight. There's going to be one more. Oh. It's pouring too much, trying to get the glug. So, Old Pulteney for me often had a nice citrusy, salty citrusy note. The salty maritime thing was often something that had to be suggested to me, but it's definitely there. You might not find it in your own, but as soon as you know you're sipping Old Pulteney, you go looking for the saltiness, and usually you find it. maybe not immediately, not tonight, but the oranginess is there. This is orange. This is sweet, just out the bottle, of course, not even giving it time to rest again. This isn't a review for any of these things I'm uncorking tonight, but it is first impressions. Sweet orange, even charred caramel type orange, caramelized orange, sorry. Some kind of floral note, sure. Can't really pinpoint it, but it's sweet. Honey, but like a darker honey. No smoke that's detectable to me. Hard for me to pick up smoke, as you guys know. And a richness that kind of makes you want to, I mean, there's a sense that this is more mature here. No alcohol prickle, soft, integrated together. Let's give it a second to rest. Stefan Novak is in. So good to see Stefan. Pulteney 16 is even better with more salinity, travel retail release, and less expensive than the 15. Great stuff with only one problem. It's not as good as the old 17. Unfortunately, that's going to happen to a lot of producers. They're going to build this legendary product from stocks that were deeper to an audience that's ready for it, that remembers it, and it's ready for more of the same. And then they try and kind of realign things based on the stocks that they have today. And I think it's a tough ask for a lot of them. And some people, if you take the cynical look, will say that they're often trying to build newer products from stocks that were probably focusing too much on efficiency and yield rather than making the best single malt that they could. I think that is also going to change in time as well with the growth and interest in single malt. This is nosing like a good whiskey. It's not amazing. It's not jumping out, but it's good. Orangey prevails. Not a lot of salinity. There is something. It's like it's not honey. Maybe it is honey, but it's like an estery, sweet, thick. Like if you maybe one of these aromas that you would pick up in the fermentation room, right? Anyway, let's have a wee go. This is the most expensive one that I'll sip tonight. This is the one that's getting the closest to the price of that Lagavulin. It's a year younger than the Lagavulin, but it's 46% ABV. and it's about £65 to the Lagavulin being 70. I'm not comparing it to Lagavulin, but I am comparing the cost of production. You know, there's not a huge difference in distillery size here between Pulteney way up in the north. There's not a huge difference in remoteness, albeit you have to take a ferry to bring the whiskey back from Lagavulin. And there's not a huge difference in price. This is good. This is a longer finish than I would expect. I think there's subtlety here. I think this is one of these whiskies that's going to do well from opening up a little bit, a wee bit of evaporation, a wee bit of time in an open bottle, a time to relax in the glass. Oh, wow. Okay, a wee bit of... it's still citrus. It's still very, very citrus forward, but it's now going to be a bit lemony, a bit cleaner. But there's still a bread dough thing happening. I can't quite put my finger on it. No, it's good though. Again, it's not, there's no youth, there's no jagged edges, but the 46% ABV gives you enough grip and there's texture there. Still quite thick, it's quite a rich whiskey. Salty on the finish, there's a bit of salt there, there's definitely salt there. I think that this is one that's going to be quite nice. However, I think it's pricey. I think it's pricey for a 15-year-old. If you're putting your 12-year-old out there at sub £30, albeit at 40% ABV, I know. How can it be double the price for your 15-year-old? It's just too expensive. Now, I may spend a bit of time with this bottle as it drops over the shoulder and I get to understand it a bit more, because I'm not reviewing this. I can't review it tonight. But at first approach, based on this tonight, this is a good solid whiskey. Is it a good solid £65 whiskey? No. It's a good solid 50 quid whiskey. Honestly, that's my feeling at first approach. But I'm going to give it time. It deserves it. All whiskies do, and see how we go on with this. So I don't know where to park this one, left or right. Let's put it somewhere in the middle. Akshay is in. Good to see you. A bit of Ireland in it, perhaps. The Pulteney. Louis Souza is saying, I've been curious to try Pulteney 15 for a while, but I usually prefer to start with entry-level 12-year-old, and that damn 40% puts me off. Distilleries should avoid this practice, unless there has to be a space where there has to be, as whiskey enthusiasts, as geeks, we have to give up a wee bit of the malt landscape to the idea that, some people just don't want to drink 46, 48, 50% plus spirits. Some people genuinely find it too hot and they're going to want to drink it a wee bit lighter. So we have to give up the fact that there's going to be entry-level gateway products that's going to be lower ABV. And that's maybe going to mean that, because of the market, they're going to have to chill filter it and things like that. And we understand. But does that mean that when they bring out something that's much more kind of, let's say, I don't want to use the word craft, but a bit more presented towards the enthusiast, that they can suddenly double the price? And people say, oh, yes, you have to understand that the volumes at the lower entry-level product, that makes them profit in order for them to bring much more craft-presented premium products. These premium products exist on the back of the mass market. That's just utter nonsense. You're telling me that the 12-year-old is £25 to £30, albeit supermarket prices. If you buy it from a retailer, it's probably 34, something like that. But for 3 years more maturation and 3%, depending on where you are, maybe 6% more ABV in there, it's double the price. And they're making the profit from the cheap one. It's nonsense. The prices are what the market will stand. So if I'm going to pay £65 for Old Pulteney 15, I'm not going to judge it as a 15-year-old. I'm going to judge it as a £65 whiskey. And at £65, you can buy whiskies that'll knock you on your backside. Glentower at 12 is a perfect example. Yes, it's 3 years younger than that, but it's okay. We have to judge it based on how much we've paid for it. Neil Gupta is in saying we are a tiny part of the bigger whiskey drinking world. I agree, Neil, but we are getting bigger, and the slice of pie that we occupy is a bigger slice year by year by year, especially when it comes to percentage margins. Everyone is saying my limited impression is the distilleries have figured out that there is a significant demand for a luxury product that people can afford. Nothing says luxury like older age statement. That's right. That's right. It's what I want to pull away from that. Peter Hunt is saying you're right. It's not about the age. It's about the quality and price. It's the value proposition, Peter, isn't it? It's the bang for buck, if you want to talk about that. It's the package. It's the cost of ownership. It's all of it together. We're enthusiasts, but we're also suckers, right? We're drawn in by brands, previous experiences that we've had, because we do like the aesthetic of certain bottles or whatever it may be. But the more that we work as a community, the more we lead each other, the more we try things blind, the more when we hand over our cash, actually think twice about it when we hand over the cash, the more armed we'll be. Here's what I really want to do tonight. One of the distilleries that really let me down in 2021 is this distillery. But interestingly, it's also one of the distilleries that blew my socks off. Really surprised, really encouraging. I bought a Warehouse 2 edition from Fettercairn. I enjoyed it so much that it meant that when the 16-year-old was there and available, it was a bit pricey. I paid close to, okay, don't quote me on this, but I think I paid about £78 for this. It's a litre bottle. This is a litre, and I have to be clear about that. There's a lot in this. This was originally intended for duty-free. But I was able to buy it retail in the UK, and it arrived, and I was eager to open it and try it because I was loving the Warehouse 2 edition. And I poured this Fettercairn 16, and I'm going to pour it in a blue Glencairn tonight. The one I've picked up has a yellow dot on the bottom. I won't see that, but you'll see that. So the old one is going to have the yellow dot on the bottom. And the reason I'm pouring it in a blue Glencairn, I'm going to try and make the measures the same in both glasses. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to test it blind against its new release. Look at these two bottles. Now, I appreciate that one is much bigger. One's a litre bottle, and the other one is a 700ml or a 70 cl. Right, the camera's seeing my face, so if it can stop seeing my face for a second, it'll focus on the bottles. There we go. So look at the difference in colour here. The ABV is 46.4 on both bottles, but it's quite remarkable. I hope the camera is picking up just how different the colour is on those two bottles. This one does not mention anything about natural colour. I have to hope at 46.4 they may be considered not chill filtering it, but this one doesn't say on the bottle either, but on the box tells me that it's natural colour and non-chill filtered. And you can see a significant difference. Now, there's less chatter about the casks that was used for this. There was talk about chocolate malt and things like that at the time. I know that that's part of it. Chocolate malt will not give you this color. The chocolate malt is just roasted malt. It's a flavor thing. It doesn't give you much alcohol yield either. It certainly doesn't color your whiskey like this. Caramel coloring may color your whiskey like this. The problem I had with this whiskey is that it was flat, it was linear, boring, dull. It was not a 16-year-old product and experience to me. It was not what I was expecting from Fettercairn, and it let me down. I did not like this whiskey. I'm struggling to get through this. The only reason I've got this much drunk is because I'm pouring it for people to see what they think, and it's not blown away anyone. This is a smooth whiskey for somebody who likes something soft and smooth. There's no real bite or interest or representation of what Fettercairn can make in this bottle, in my opinion. The Warehouse 2 is a different prospect altogether. It's fabulous stuff. In fact, it may be something to do with the rye cask, but there's so much pineapple and grapefruit, specifically citrus tang of grapefruit in that bottle, that it makes me think of a soda that we have in the UK called, or we used to have, I don't know if we still have it now, it's called Lilt, and it was a pineapple and grapefruit soda. A puff of vapor of smoke from the bottle, not smoke aroma, but just a wee puff of mist. And I'm going to pour this in the other blue Glencairn I have, and it's got a blue dot on the bottom. I'll try and pour it roughly the same amount. Now you're going to say, Roy, but you know, you've got one on the left, you've got one on the right. I'm sure you do this at home yourself. If you're ever trying blind tasting, all you have to do is just switch it round while you're distracted doing something else. And already I have no idea which is which. I've not been concentrating on it at all. So I don't know which is the old one and which is the new one. But if I look at this here, I've got the levels about right, and there's no way we can see that huge difference in colour in these blue glasses. I hope you can see that too. So we're going to see how we get on. John Drinks is in. He's saying Lilt lives, but she's no the same since they cut the sugar. Isn't that the same for so many soft drinks? So you can still buy pineapple and grapefruit Lilt with the totally tropical taste. Good stuff, John. Good to see you in. Jimmy Laga saying you've opened more bottles tonight than I have in a year. Well, that's 3 bottles. That's it. That's all that's getting opened tonight. But I'm doing this and sharing, honestly, I've spent my money. I'm going to give you just my opening kind of appraisal for the ones I'm uncorking. The other ones I've gotten to know quite well, in the hope that you maybe don't have to. Anyway, let's try this. Let's go in. You will probably, as I sip it, you'll see what it is. I know what this is. Immediately I know. So I've not really nosed the new Fettercairn. I'm going to look like an idiot if I'm wrong. But there's this, if you could smell and taste caramel, or what I associate the smell and taste of caramel would do to a whiskey, it's this. I don't have the greatest palate. I don't have the greatest nose. But there's something about this that's it's like a bitter, sweet. It's not appealing. Let's have a wee taste. This is where I'm going to look away, because if I lift this up and if I'm looking at either screen, you'll think I'm looking at the colour dot on the bottom. I think this is going to be the yellow dot. You should see the yellow dot. I'll close my eyes as I take a sip, okay? I hope that's not the new one. It's not as bad as I remember, if it is the yellow dot, if it is the original one. But oh no, but it is. Okay, I hope that's not the new one. I hope I'm right. Let's reach for the second one. There's a kind of bitter. If you've ever had sugar-free gum, if you've ever had sugar-free mints or anything, there's a saccharine, a not very nice, bitter, but still sweet aftertaste. And that's what I get from this. So all the other flavors that I've had along the experiences has this kind of overriding thing. And there's also a kind of flatness about it, where if you imagine as you taste whiskey, you can sometimes see shapes and textures and things. Well, I can see colors and taste colors. But this for me is so just, it's smooth. It's like it's rounded and not in a nice way. It's like it's been put together to be as easy to drink as possible. So let's try our second Glencairn in the hope that this is the new one. Okay, this is subdued. This is quiet. If it is the new one, it's only just been opened. I hope that it is. If I'm looking like an idiot to everybody, then this is the point of blind tasting. Let's just go with it. So I'm looking for the kind of grapefruit thing. I'm looking for a bit of zing. There's a Palo Cortado maturation going on in here as well. If it's the new one. Night and day. Excellent. So Fettercairn has this odd, it's a green herbal thing, a wee bit citrus, it's bitter grapefruit that has a lick of that in it. It's here, but there's a sweetness here, like maybe not thick prunes or figs, but like raisin, dried grapes, something cake-like and sweet. This must be the yellow one. Sorry, this must be the blue one that I've just sipped. It must be the new one. It must be the new one. Please let it be the new one. Best whiskey I've sipped tonight. Whatever this is, going to look like an idiot, but I feel really super confident. Go back to this. You've got kind of really sweet powder now. There's a cold, milky coffee thing going on here now, like a cold cup of coffee, cappuccino. It's quite nice on the nose, actually. But it's sweet. What is that sweetness? What is that odd sweetness? So this has got to be yellow, and this new one has got to be blue. Aye, absolutely. But if you were here with me, if you were doing exactly what I'm doing, you would, it's night and day. You'd taste the difference. So look at these. Forget about the color and forget about the size of the bottle. They need to tell everyone that this is the 2021 release and this is the old release, which I believe was 2020. It might have been 2019. Originally designed for travel retail, I believe, but then obviously because of COVID, it made itself on a wider retail shelves, which is why it's a litre bottle. This is a different prospect altogether. This is the best whiskey I've sipped tonight. And I'm going to take a sip in order to get that bitter, slightly acrid aftertaste that the previous 16 has given me away. Oh my goodness, this is excellent. Can I tell you what's excellent about it? Even more excellent about it. The previous one cost me in the 70s. I can't really remember. It might have been close to £80. It was quite expensive, but I decided to pay it because it was a litre, and I was really disappointed. This is £65. This is cheaper. I think £65 is the right price. It's at the top end of the price that you should be paying for it. But this is a good whiskey. Not only is it good, but it's interesting. It's not got the same lemon and lime thing I was talking about in the Warehouse 2, but there is a nice citrus side to this. It is an interesting citrus. It's a dry citrus. It is like grapefruit. This is exactly what you want to discover. Things get better. Much better. Like, much better. If you're ordering Fettercairn 16 online, please be careful because they're both 46.4%. 70 CL may be a guarantee, I think. This is the one with Palo Cortado. 2021 release. I hope that your online retailers are specifying the difference. Check with them first. This is probably a buy. If you've enjoyed independent Fettercairns before that's given you a lot of engagement and enjoyment, this is much closer to that experience. If you've not enjoyed the Fasks and the Fjords from the past, if you thought they were thin and watery and odd and bizarre and this is not the same thing. This is a different thing. Hoyt saying almost sounds like you're blessed with synesthesia. I think I am. I definitely, and I think a lot of people that I talk to feel the same. when you're tasting, you see shapes and things, not obvious shapes, but the flavor experience gives you an idea whether it's jagged or round or soft and gloopy or whatever it may be. It looks, Doc is shouting at Lynn, is my wife in? Fernando's saying, excellent, Roy. Good stuff, Fernando. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Is it because of the Fettercairn thing? I'm not sure. Jeff Whisky saying, that was the most relief in any eye I've ever heard. Whiskey Throttle saying, now, if you did that with an old release compared to a new release of Glenlivet or Glenfiddich, well, I've done that on the channel before, Daniel, and it's often telling. Dominic Fife is saying, Greg Glass would make a great and timely guest. Fettercairn in from the cold. Even Tam Navulin let him loose on Jura. I feel the same as you, Dominic. I think that there might be an element of Greg Glass at play here. I hope that that's the case, because he's the new guard, isn't he? And he's maybe got more of a kind of more of an idea of how he's going to shape this and make this thing work. I don't want to knock Richard Patterson because he's a legend, but that 16 versus this 16 is not even in the same ballpark. And that's a good thing. Everyone, any reason to believe batch 2 is not just a blind squirrel finding that acorn every once in a while? Do you know what, everyone? That's what we do here, is we try and work as a community. We work it out. We work out if this is going to be consistent. We work out if this is going to be the future, if this is just going to be a one-off. But I don't want to drink this. But I do want to go back to this. It's not the same as the Warehouse 2 in my memory, but it's fantastic. And I have a feeling that this is going to become a favourite. And it's different. It does taste like Fettercairn. Fettercairn is in a similar camp to Turmore to me, to Bowmore. I know that Bowmore's peated, it's an Isla, but they have a grapefruit thing that can often float towards a tropical note. And it can often be a wee bit green and herby, overly floral perhaps, depending on the cask, depending on the maturation, that kind of thing. But when it's in check and when it's in balance, it's not just interesting, it's wonderful. Doc is saying, Horse Learning says the Fettercairn 16-second release is not coloured. I can tell you on the box, it tells you that it's not coloured. It doesn't say on the bottle, but on the box it says unchill filtered, natural colour. Malt Brother Ray, Aquavita, is the bottle code on the Fettercairn readable? Does it mention 2021? Well, it did when I bought it. It actually told me on the site. And listen, we don't, you don't need a bottle code. Not only is it a hugely different sized bottle, a litre versus 70 cl in the new one, but look at the colour difference. And by the way, Malt Brother Ray, that looks like a new name. And a cool name too. It's nice to welcome you in here. Whiskey Weekend Dram Harrow is saying, time for some needed sleep. Fettercairn, too expensive here. That's a shame, Harrow. That's a shame. Have a look out to see if you get a price drop on the new 16. Brian is saying, I was lucky enough to compare old release of Longmorn 16 to a newer bottling, and the difference was shocking. Listen, there's going to be differences. There's going to be differences. We can accept differences. What we don't want is huge drop-offs in quality. My wife is in. People are mentioning Linduff. Glad he's enjoying the new one. Happy husband. You are in here. I'm glad you've got all the kids to bed and you're getting a wee bit of downtime, I hope. Why are you in here hanging out with us and watching me? You see me all the time. Good stuff. Terrific. I'm very, very pleased about that. And I'm going to give you one kind of last wee shout. Where's the other bottle? It's behind the camera. I can't believe I've... Listen, I'll go over and grab it because I want to grab it. It should have been here. And it'll give me a chance to grab the Fettercairn box and the old Pulteney box as well. But let's pop this here and see if you can see what I'm going to pull up. Okay. These have only just recently been taken out the box. And what's going to be nice to see, if I show you the Fettercairn box that I've just bought, If I try and get it to zoom in, you'll see right in the center there, natural colour, non-chill filtered, but 46.4%, same as before. Let's see if the old Pulteney enlightens us in any way. It can't be that hard. You're putting out 46%. Okay, it looks like I'm going to need to dive into the soup. Look how tiny that text is. I mean, I hope your eyesight is better than mine, but I'm going to end up with a Ralphie magnifying glass to read that. So we don't know. The jury's still out. We have to hope on the old Pulteney that it is unchill filtered. Absolutely, 46%. You would assume so. But hopefully, it's natural colour as well. I mean, it's not too dark. That is roughly in line with what you would expect the colour of a 15-year-old whiskey to be. And I'm going to spend a bit of time getting to know that old Pulteney better. But I can tell this Fettercairn is going to be a good one. Okay. Here's one that's a bit of an outlier. It doesn't meet all the requirements of ABCDs. Age, bottling strength, chill filtration, and dye, D for colour. It doesn't. In fact, it only meets one of those. And yet, it remains a bit of a fetish of mine. What's interesting to me about it is that it's the only official bottling from the distillery. So, and there's lots and lots of independent releases that you can compare it against. So that's fun to do. The producer's idea of what this distillery should taste like, and all these single casks, small batch releases from lots of independents. I'm talking about one of my favourite distilleries, Lagavulin. So here we have a 16-year-old from Diageo, the same age as Lagavulin, and much, much smaller volumes. £55. £55. The presentation is the same, 43%. Now, I know what you're going to do. You're going to scream at me. You're going to say, Roy, what are you doing? All that's going to happen is the price of Lagavulin Flora and Fauna 16-year-old is going to go up to 70 quid. If it does, it's another one that's gone. We don't buy it anymore. Let it sit on the shelf. Let it gather dust. It's too expensive. But my point is, 16-year-old whiskey from a, okay, Lagavulin's bigger than Lagavulin's 2.5 million litres per annum. Lagavulin's a bigger deal. I know that. But it's smaller production. It's very small. £15 of a difference. Now, do you want something? Do you want a sledgehammer to drive that nail home? How about another Diageo 43% product at 15 years old? 1 year of a difference, 1 year younger than the Lagavulin, admittedly. £42, Dalwhinnie 15. Now, I'm not recommending that everyone runs out and buys Dalwhinnie 15. It's a bit pedestrian. It's not got the most engagement or grip. Dalwhinnie's a fantastic spirit, but it's so rare to try it outside of that 15-year-old and the nonsense that comes out with Winter's Gold and all of these. No. I would have loved to have got the North Star Dalwhinnie, but I missed it. I would have loved to have tried the special releases Dalwhinnie, but I didn't get one. But forget about that. Lagavulin is a small distillery on Islay, 2.5 million litres per annum. Dalwhinnie is smaller. And they're able to put out a 15-year-old malt for £43. And you're telling me, anybody tries to tell me that Lagavulin has to be £70 because they'll make a loss in any other circumstances. Nonsense. That price change going like that is not about recovering costs or recouping costs. That is about charging what the market will stand. I'm going to stop talking about Lagavulin 16, the same as I stopped talking about Glendronach 15. They move away from us. We celebrate them while they're pointed at us. And when they go, c'est la vie. The whiskey market is flooded with alternatives and we don't need to worry. The sweet spot is still rich pickings. Ooh. The reason I brought this along in case you needed another weekend of hammer to tap in another nail home. This is an indie, and I know that I've been having a go at indies recently to talk about how their prices are getting out of hand as well. But have a wee look at this proposition. This is a single malt from North Star. I appreciate not everyone can get North Star, but there are other Dillunes available here, there, and everywhere, all over the place. And this is a 14-year-old. If I could get the camera to focus, you would be able to see that. Come on, camera. Let's force the issue here by doing a bit of that. So you can see that this is a 14-year-old, but look, this is cask strength. 52.5% ABV, 14 years old, still in the sweet spot. Now, this isn't opened yet. I don't want to open it tonight because I've already uncorked 3, but I'll open this soon. This was £55. Don't tell me that it costs that much to produce that whiskey. Don't tell me you need to charge £70 for this thing. Garbage. You're charging what the market will stand. You're responding to retailers who are campaigning you to increase the prices so that they can increase what they do. They can make more out of what they do. And I'm not talking about we indies and people that look after us. I'm talking about the big guys with the volume. Let these whiskies go. There are millions of other whiskies. I've just shown you a few select ones tonight. Go out where you are in the market, where you, whatever the prices are where you are, whatever the availability is, and look at things that you would normally walk past. Look at the presentation, look at the ABV, consider the price. Don't just look at the brand. Don't just look at the age. Consider all of it. Get together, do bottle splits, join a club, do whatever you can to try as many things as you can and know that the future remains bright. There are always going to be new whiskies out there. I'm very, very grateful to Fettercairn for proving that they're one of the ones that can do that, much like Deanston has done, much like Glencadam has done, much like Glenturret has done. Now, maybe the jury's still out on Old Pulteney. I think it's the most expensive one I had tonight, and it's still got a bit of work to do. It's not offering much more than the Glen Grant. Anyway, let me know what you think. Ian Bose is saying, I can't help feeling that some high-profile distilleries charge a premium price based on historic reputation, not the quality of the product today. Listen, I don't mind if people invest in their brand and then trying to cash out on it, but they can't just suddenly go from £55 to £70 overnight. Or what we're worried about seeing with the Talisker prices, especially on the 18-year-old, is more than doubling in price overnight. Off you. You know, we just have to. Doc is shouting at Roddy. Could Roddy be in tonight? Rod Graham is in tonight. Good to see you, Roddy. I wonder what your opinion is on some of the things I've been sharing tonight. What do we all think about having another Roddy vPub in the near future? I would personally enjoy that very much. Molasses is saying, how involved is the distillery in setting these prices when it seems like distributors so often take a bigger margin than the distilleries themselves? Or I am mistaken on that? No, Mike, you're absolutely right. So what tends to happen, especially on things that are good value here in the UK, when it goes through distribution channels, they're able to just put their own markup on it and price it based on the perceived value, based on age or what the peer competition is charging. It's a huge problem, and it's really difficult for distilleries to fix that, especially the further out the supply chain and the distribution goes. It is a real problem. What I would say is do it from the consumer end, push back, tell the retailer this is far too expensive, far too expensive. Doc is saying age is only one of many price influencing factors. See Talisker 8, Roy. Just to name one example, warehousing costs are most probably a single-digit percentage of the total cost to make whiskey. Doc, that's my point tonight, buddy. We absolutely agree. Falscraft is saying Pulteney is in a weird space of fame and unknown. I have no idea how to value their brand quality fandom mix. Pulteney used to be held really, really high, and I don't know what's happened. It just kind of dropped off the radar after the rebrand. The 17 and the 21 went. I know they were highly, highly regarded. The 12-year-old has always been seen as a supermarket volume product. And it's kind of a shame they find themselves in that, neither meat nor fish territory now. They've got this nice range, but I feel like if the price was in check, if the labelling, come on, do what Speyburn are doing, Glencadam are doing, do what Deanston are doing. Just say we are bringing natural product to you. This is a premium thing. This is not mass market anymore. And look at the prices we're charging, so we justify it. And it's going, you have to kind of commit. Chris Pollock is saying, Roddy vPub, always great. Scott Pascoe is saying, yes, please, absolutely. And Daniel Williams is saying, Roddy vPub spam. Can't go wrong with a Roddy vPub, says Mashburn, absolutely. Helen is saying, stepping away from single malts there is a great bang for buck in the blended malt area. Douglas Lang, Timorous Beastie, 18-year-old in our Glencairns. I saw that photograph you shared, Ellen, and I'm glad you're enjoying that wee 18-year-old. You might find the blended malts is for an upcoming vPub. Jimmy Legg is saying the dram is to lure Roddy back. There is no such thing as too much of a great guest. Roddy, I hope you're still in hearing all of this. I tell Roddy how much he's appreciated when he does appear, but I'm not sure. He's a wee modest Glaswegian, and I don't know how much he believes me, but it's true. He is here. He's saying Pulteney 17, a great whiskey and also very well priced. When it was available, I remember that was a 65 quid whiskey, and I think it was 65 quid right up till the point that it was discontinued. The 21 was about a 95 pounds whiskey, if I remember well, before it disappeared. And Brian is saying the States are such a mess with availability and pricing, so many overpriced bottles due to the systems in place state to state. Peter Hunt is saying Stuart Baxter is one of their brand ambassadors for Old Pulteney. Very honest and upfront about stuff. Formerly Douglas Lang, might be a shout to give him a call. Well, Stuart Baxter has been on a vPub in the past, talking about the prices and the cost and why take a single cask product and blend it. Why make a blended malt white? And Stuart Baxter was actually a very insightful guest. And if he's over at Ingvar House now, he might be a good guy to reach out to. But remember, when you reach out to the guys that are working for the producers, that it's tough for them to step out of their, you might find, I think he would be a good guy. You're absolutely right. Said Martin is saying, I think the Fettercairn labels did have the release year on them when you held them up to camera. Ooh. That would be cool. I absolutely said, you're absolutely right. It says in the blue band here, second release 2021. And this one says first release 2020. Said Martin, got my back. Cheers, buddy. Thank you. McCallum Final Rare's talking about Pedro Menezes. I don't know if it's Menezes. No, you're in Brazil, Pedro, so it's Menezes. I'm sorry, buddy, if I'm making a mess of your name. Doc is saying that you had a great point. Same warehouses for almost all malts of Diageo, no matter how cheap or expensive. Centralised warehousing is absolutely a thing. Not all of it is centralised, of course, we know that. But absolutely, the warehousing year-by-year cost is the same. And Dalwhinnie and Lagavulin are virtually, not the same size, but they're within a few 100,000 litres, the same size. I think about 2.2 million litres for Dalwhinnie and about 2.5 million litres for Lagavulin. So it's similar. Everything is similar. There's a ferry involved in Lagavulin. That's not where the cost is coming from. Woven blends are interesting, Roy. Ooh. Says Graham Fraser, and Mark Winter is saying Pulteney 15 is not coloured. Always head to the German websites for clarity. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for your help there. We should have that in the UK. Everywhere should have that. If you're adding colouring, you have to tell people. Daniel is saying, what do you think the bottles of Port Ellen, my lower price in the reopening? Has it opened? Would you think that bottles of Port Ellen might lower in price with the reopening? No, it's not opened yet, and it's not even close to opening. It's still very much a work in progress at Port Ellen. Brora is opened, but let's forget about it. If you're having to pay an entry price of about 150 to 300 pounds just to tour the place, that doesn't bode well for the whiskey being something we can engage with. Forget about it, Jimmy. Pedro is saying, but look at the tiny Oban. Aye. Absolutely. 14-year-old product as well, and still affordable. In fact, I think I've got a price for the Oban here because it was one I'd studied and I looked at. And I can tell you that it's one of the cheapest. It was £46 when I did the first Where's the Value vPub back in 2020. But it's now £52. Still one of the cheaper ones. Interestingly, that out of the top 5, 3 of them are Diageo. The top 5 in the sweet spot: Dalwhinnie, Clynelish, and Oban. The other 2 is a Tom and Tell from Angus Dundee and Glenfiddich 15-year-old Solera. So there's a couple of the ones that I would I like. I have a soft spot for Oban. I do like it, even if it's at 43%. Clynelish is at 46%, and absolutely my pick of that top 5. However, I'm worried about what's going to happen at Clynelish in the future. I'm not suggesting that we grab it while we can. There's millions of whiskey out there. If you like waxy product, Dalwhinnie is a good one to go for. Anyway, who fancies a quiz? I appreciate that last week's quiz was a wee bit crunchy. It was tough. I took a wee bit of flack for it, but you were all very good, highly spirited, or kind about it, let's say. I did pitch it a bit high last week. I don't think anyone got a 10 out of 10. Maybe somebody did on the replay. If you did, well done to you. But I've tried to make things a wee bit more comfortable tonight. So if you'd like to stay for the quiz, please do that. How we get on for time? 140 should be quite a neat vPub tonight for a wee change. Fastcraft is saying, actually, if the sweet spot whiskies become too expensive, vintage bottles and single casks are still an alternative, and indies can still be good value. And I'll go one further than that, Fastcraft. I'll say that we're at the point that there is so much hoarded product right now that there's an inevitability that the secondary market will soften, and it might even soften very quickly. I don't want to say crash, but... And Cohen is saying, talk about Macallan, please. So Cohen, one of the reasons that I don't talk about Glendronach anymore is because of a direction shift that they've changed that just feels like they've moved away from us after building a reputation from enthusiasts, honestly speaking, much like Macallan did way back in the day, you know. And maybe that's the way that Talisker is going to move and Lagavulin is going to move. It's going to move away from us. Macallan has long gone, and that's why I don't talk about it so much anymore. There's just not, it's difficult to find positive things. I remember how negative I was about Glenturret when they brought out their 12-year-old, and it was more expensive than Macallan's 12-year-old sherry cask, and I thought, I'm going to dismiss that. But it was at 46% ABV, and Stefan Novak and some other people in the community was, you know, they were saying, you know, have you tried these new Glenturrets? It was mind-blowing. I couldn't, it did teach me a lesson about not judging on age statement, okay, but Glenturret can bring that product out that's really like old school Macallan. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. At 46% ABV, some of the releases from Glenturret are even higher. Much, much more engagement. And if they charge that price, we judge it based on the price, and it's not going to let us down. The quality is fantastic. Even with 3 of us watching last week's quiz, we barely scraped a pass. The hog says. I think you might do a wee bit better tonight. I hope you do. Ben is in Whiskey with Molly. 6 drams tonight on SMWS tasting. Taught me not to ignore certain distilleries. Different expressions can be fantastic. I have to say, this wee Fettercairn tonight is suiting me rather nicely. There's that's gone sweet now. It's that kind of, the citrus is less. It's more of a kind of, it's almost like a mango-y. There's a ripe tropical thing. This is a different whiskey. This is interesting, super interesting. Doesn't have that acrid finish. Doesn't have that emulsified, flattened texture. Terrific, just terrific. Kilted Moose, Scotty is in. Can we do it again? I know that we've done it. Everybody, now that Scotty is in and he's 50 today, can we do it again? Can we spam the chat with many happy returns, Kilted Moose? Scott is 50 today. Scott, I think that you're going to enjoy this Fettercairn very much. I can take it out the blue glass now, and I can pour it into a clear glass. This new Fettercairn 16 is much, much better than the old one. The birthday boy is here, says Jimmy Legg. Roy, trying my first Glen Lossie, says Mark Slinger. Very nice dram with a sour hint that is quite nice. Superb. I do love a wee Glen Lossie myself. A nice one to pick up from an indie. Falsgraf is saying, funny, it becomes tradition that I finish the quiz with a rum, having drank all the scheduled whiskies. Pour your rum, Falsgraf, and we'll get the quiz on the go. Maybe it's the night that Scotty, if he's here, if he can stay for long enough, although I'm sure he's been celebrating his 50th tonight, he might be able to snag a 10 out of 10 on tonight's quiz. Could we make a gift for him? Such a thing? I don't think so. Jimmy Legg, did I miss a dram from you? I think I picked it up, didn't I, buddy? Oh no, it was the Roddy dram. You bought me it for Roddy, didn't you? To lure Roddy back. Thank you so much. Okay, let's get the quiz on the go. I hope it's a wee bit easy. Certainly the outward 5 questions should be a wee bit easier. I hope that that's the case anyway. Let's try and add it to this stream. Good luck, everyone. Remember, if it's the first time here, if there's a first quiz, it's always optional. It's whether you want to share your score or not, and it's always multiple choice too. You're only playing against yourself. Chris B is just joined Aquavitae Barflies. Chris, thank you very, very much for helping to keep these vPubs ad-free. They'll never be monetized because of the support I get from people clicking that join button underneath. All members get badges and emojis. Thank you very much and welcome to the Barflies. Good luck, everybody. Let's roll into question 1. Interestingly, this came up, didn't it? We almost spilled the beans. After Royal Loch Oban is Diageo's second smallest distillery, but also their what? Also their A, 5th best seller, B, only distillery founded in the 18th century, or C, their only original classic malt to maintain the same age statement from launch. So if it helps you, any of the classic malts were Lagavulin, Cragganmore, Dalwhinnie, Oban, Talisker, and I'm forgetting one, Glenkinchie. There you go. So are we saying that Oban at 14 years old is the only one to maintain that age statement from launch? Or is it their 5th bestseller, A? B, only distillery founded in the 18th century. That's a year starting with 17. Or C, the only classic malt to maintain the same age statement from launch. Ooh, this is a big banana skin. Lagavulin Classic Malt was launched at 16 years old and it maintained it till today. Talisker 10 launched as a classic malt at 10, maintained it till today. Glenkinchie was launched as a 10, it changed to 12, and it's the only one to have done so. So it was not C. So many of you answered C, so I know that it's a bad start, sorry. Oban is, in fact, Diageo's 5th best seller. Diageo is huge, 28 distilleries that they own, but they have to put 3 distilleries together. That's Glendullan, Glen Ord, and Duffton in order to make the singleton, to make it compete with the sales of a Glenlivet, a Glenmorangie, or a Glenfiddich. It's kind of made up of lots of smaller distilleries. Their biggest is Roseisle, Chininic. It's quite interesting. Number 2. Which English distillery is set to release its inaugural Wireworks single malt bottling on the 3rd of February? Much anticipated. We've got an English distillery releasing a brand new 3rd of February single malt, the first time out. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's thinking about it. Kilted Booses. I think he started on a wrong question. Oh dear. With the benefit of hindsight, it was a crunchy one to start with. I apologise, but I think this is a wee bit easier. Which English distillery is bringing out its inaugural product on the 3rd of February? Everybody's looking forward to this one. Is it A, White Peak in Derbyshire, B, Spirit of Yorkshire, in Yorkshire obviously, or C, Henstone, which I think is it Shropshire? I'm not sure. Regardless, which one's bringing out its inaugural release on the 3rd of February? White Peak, Spirit of Yorkshire, or Henstone? Here, Jimmy Leggy saying a duffer is a bad golf shot. Is it the same here? Jimmy, you don't know what it's like being brought up with a surname like Duff. Anything that's broken or doesn't go to plan or or a bad golf shot, absolutely, it's called a duffer. It's the same here. I use the term myself, honestly. Absolutely right. You kicked this out the park. It is indeed a White Peak, bringing out their release on 3rd of February. Here's a wee picture of the bottle. It's called the Wireworks because they make their whiskey in an old Wireworks, and you can see that this is a really cool kind of custom bottle, and it looks like strands of wire that's gone up and twisted at the top. It's quite a cool bottle design. I'm not quite as into packaging as some. I'd be quite happy with a plain bottle and a cheaper price, but you have to do what you can and understand what they're doing here. It's going to be interesting to try this whiskey. I've tried their Spirit and I thought it was really quite interesting. Henstone and Spirit of Yorkshire already have their whiskies out. They released whiskies, I believe both of them, last year. Question 3, how many Scotch malt whisky distillery owners can boast a distillery in each of the 5 SWA defined regions? So how many of the producers out there have a distillery in all of the SWA defined regions? Is it A, none, B, 1, or C, 2? Still 320 of you in at the very end for the quiz. Way over 400 in of you tonight at the peak. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on a Thursday night. I really appreciate it. I think that with a wee bit of contemplative thought, the majority of you will pick this out, no problem. And absolutely you have. None is the answer. Absolutely none of them. If you consider that Campbelltown only has Glen Scotia, Glengyle, and Springbank and Glengyle owned by the same company, and they don't have any distilleries anywhere else. Glen Scotia, yes, they have a distillery in Loch Lomond in the Highlands, but that's it. So just Campbelltown makes that an easy one to answer. There are no producers that has a presence. Not even Diageo has a presence in all 5 regions. Question 4. What happened on the same day Loch launched their inaugural bottling? This was very recent, as you'll see from the answers. That has to be quite recent. What happened on the same day that Loch launched their inaugural bottling? A, JWST, that's the James Webb Space Telescope, reached its final orbit. B, Burns was celebrated worldwide. Or C, Neil Diamond turned 81. Chris Pollack is suggesting that Diageo has to build one down in Campbelltown. Well, there are plans afoot for Campbelltown distilleries, but not to my knowledge is it going to be with any Diageo involvement. What happened the same day that Loch launched their inaugural bottling was that the James Webb Space Telescope finally reached its L2 final orbit. Was it that Burns was celebrated worldwide, or was it that Neil Diamond turned 81? I can tell you that Loch is a new distillery that is actually built on a farm where Robert Burns spent a few years working farming that local farm there. And they very deliberately, it was a postponed release, but they very deliberately released it on Burns Night, or Burns Day, Robert Burns Day, 25th of January. The JWST and Neil Diamond turning 81 both happened on the day before, on Monday. Question 5 is always the picture question. At the halfway point, here's the picture. And it's a very obvious one here. I'm just going to ask you which distillery it is this week. Which distillery are we looking at here? Quite an odd angle for this one, if I'm honest. Are we looking at A, Annandale, B, Glen Scotia, or C, Old Pulteney? I always feel sorry for the people who are listening to this podcast style. You usually get to question number 5 and they've really got no chance outside of a guess of getting this one. If you are listening to this podcast style, I do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Annandale, Glen Scotia, or Old Pulteney? What are we looking at here? Graham Fraser, I'm looking at you. You should normally nail this. We've got a Gordon Fraser in. Thinking he's shouting Scotia. I wonder if Gordon Fraser is a relation to Graham. I think it's unlikely. and lots of Frasers in Scotland. Absolutely. Most of you have got this absolutely right. Matt Brown is admitting that he's crowdsourcing a B. And Robert Fredrickson is saying Aquavitae, I've been there. Superb. So you've obviously answered B for Glen Scotia there. Absolutely. So normally you see the kind of white gable with the Glen Scotia legend logotype up there. But there's a slightly different angle. You can see the pallets of barrels and things in the yard. We're looking at Glen Scotia down in Campbelltown. Glen FC, Klaus, is on 5 for 5. That looks like a new name. Welcome in, and what a score. What a fantastic score. Question 6 might be a bit of a banana skin here. According to Wikipedia, which of these words does not appear in the 1879 The Truths of Whisky book published by 4 of Dublin's top distillers? Which of these words does not appear in that Truths of Whisky book? A, distillery. B, barley. C, whisky. Which word does not appear in the Truths of Whisky book from 1879, published by 4 of the top Dublin distillers? But one of those words doesn't appear. A, distillery. B, barley. C, whisky. I need you to think a wee bit. I need you to read a wee bit. And if it helps you, if somebody's listening podcast style and they can't actually see this, it's going to make it very hard for them. It's probably helped the penny drop right there. It is actually C, whisky. The Truths of Whisky, you can see that the title of the book is spelt without an E. C here is spelt with an E. The E in Irish whiskey and subsequently the majority of American whiskey since was added much later than 1879 as a differentiator to make it quite clearly different from the poor quality Scotch. The Irish wanted to make their product known to be different, and there was lots of dynamics happening at that time, and they included the E much later. But it was never in the 19th century. The E didn't appear. So there you go. Wee bit of a banana skin. Apologies for that. I think it's an interesting question though. Which of these Tom and Tell releases is naturally non-chill filtered and natural colour? Is it A, their 15-year-old peaty tang? Is it B, their 15-year-old portwood? Or C, their 16-year-old? Their 14-year-old is a bit of an anomaly in the core range in that it is naturally presented, natural colour and non-chill filtered. But that's not an option here. The 14-year-old is an option. There's another one here that is also presented in the same natural way. And if I understand well from Tom and Tell, they're more special or specific type releases will be more naturally presented, which is a good thing to see. But Tom and Tell is a legacy distillery that tend to have the gentle dram. It tends to be 40 to 43% presentation. But which of these is actually 46% ABV, natural colour and non-chill filtered? Most of you have got this absolutely right, knowing that it's a special release. Not the PT Tang, 40%. 16-year-old is also 40%. 15-year-old Portwood is a naturally presented product. And George McLeod is saying, why colour port? Well, in this case, it depends on just how much the port cask actually imparts colour. It's not a guarantee that you're going to get a magenta or pinkish hue through the maturation for an next port cask, but hopefully you might. Yeah, you should do. It's more kind of for a flavour thing, but as it turns out, they actually don't. It is naturally coloured. Question 8, sorry. Which of these distilleries was lost most recently? I'm going to show you 3 lost distilleries, and I just want you to pick the one that's more recently lost. So the one that lasted the longest, I guess. Or A, Caperdonick, B, Little Mill, or C, Banff. 3 closed and lost distilleries. Not going to be brought back to life, but which one was lost most recently? Gordon Fraser and Graham Fraser are right next to each other and answering right next to each other in that list. There's another Fraser in. Fraser Thistle is in. Good to see you, Fraser. But they're the two Frasers, or the Frasers are answering differently. John Drinks thinks it's A for Caperdonic. George McLeod thinks it's A. Graham Murphy thinks it's A. In fact, most of you think it's A, including Graham Fraser. You're absolutely spot on. Caperdonic, Little Mill was lost in the 90s and Banff was lost in the 80s, but Caperdonic managed to make it through until 2002. And it was finally flattened by Forsyths, who have built their own plant or their own site over the top of Caperdonic Distillery, which is very close to Glen Grant. Question 9. Second from last, how many of the classic malts were launched with an age statement in the 14 to 16-year-old sweet spot? How many of the original classic malts? I might have helped you if you were listening at the start of this. How many of the original 6 Diageo classic malts launched in 1988 were launched with an age statement in the 14 to 16-year-old sweet spot that we've been covering tonight? A, 2 of them. B, 3 of them. C, 4 of them. George McLeod is saying 6 out of 8 already best score. Good for you, George. Jimmy Legg is on 7 out of 8. Good score. Jimmy Chris Pollack also on 7. And Whisky Wookie as well on 7. Molasses Mike on 7 too. Good scoring, guys. Well done. So let's see. Jolly Rover thinks this is B. Jimmy Jazz thinks it's C. Glenkinchie was launched as a 10. It changed to a 12. Talisker was a 10. Cragganmore was a 12. Lagavulin was a 16. Oban was a 14. And whatever one I can't remember was also at Dilwhinnie, of course, at 15 years old. 3, half of the range was launched in that sweet spot. Now, this is back in a time where stocks were a bit deeper, of course. I wonder if they launched the classic malts today, if the age statements would reach those lofty heights. I fear that they would not. Okay, let's see how we're doing before we go on to the final question, which is usually always an ass hat. And it is a bit of an ass hat question tonight. Absolutely. Sugar Kitty on 7 out of 9. Superb Sugar Kitty. Willie Dollier on 8 out of 9. Willie, that's a tremendous score. Peter Lee on 7. Good to see you, Peter. Whisky Wookie 7. Matt 69 7. Good to see you, Matt. Good to see you, Wookie. Sid Martin on 8. Good scoring as normal. Sid Lassie, your Otsman on 8. Ronald on 8. Kilted Moose, Scotty on 6. I hope you've had a good night despite it, buddy. Chris Pollack on 8. Ian Bowes on 8. Matt Brown on 7. Daniel Williams on 8. Gabriel Welding 7. Okay. Can I see any 9s? I can't see. We might not be getting a 10 out of 10 again tonight. I have pitched it. Perhaps just a wee bit out of reach. If you are on a 9 out of 9, please shout loudly now. Roddy Graham is in on a pass mark on 5 out of 9. Gordon Fraser has joined the Barflies as well. Gordon, welcome. Thank you very much for helping to support my friend. Cheers to you. Is the ass hat question. Let's bring it up. On 2019, Longmorn sold how many bottles of single malt globally? Okay, this is bad enough. Okay, it's bad enough. How many bottles did they sell? This is a bad enough ass hat. It's going to get worse. The same as A, the litres per annum capacity of Avenjaric. B, the litres per annum capacity of Isle of Raasay. Or C, the litres per annum capacity of Torravik. How many bottles did Longmorn sell in 2019? That's the figures that are reported. I did take this from a publication. I don't want to say what it was. Control F, no 9 out of 9, says Ronald. Well done to you, Control F. Fantastic. Gabriel is saying WTF. Absolutely. So I'm just asking you how many bottles of Longmorn was sold. This is fascinating. I hope that helps you. Jimmy Legg is saying, when I have no clue, I say C. John Drinks is saying, I am having a mental breakdown. I'm surprised you're not shouting at me. Listen, it always ends on a wee bit of an ass hat. But it is an interesting ass hat tonight. Is enough an answer, Connor Smith? That is interesting, Connor, because no, it's not enough. Pernod Ricard are very, very good at either looking after their blends, depending on how you look at it, put a positive spin on it and say they're looking after their blends, Chivas Regal, for example, and Ballantine's, or they're terrible at looking after their malts. Because Longmorn sold 22,000 bottles of malt whiskey in 2019. One of Scotland's gems of a distillery for malt whiskey. Now, fortunately, there's independents out there that's not included in that 22,000, but official bottles of Longmorn, they only managed 22,000. Now, to put that into perspective, that's less than Springbank 12 cask strength. That's, the capacity of Avengerric, that tiny little Outer Hebrides distillery, is about 20,000 litres per annum. Isla Rassay, I think, is about 200,000 litres. And Torrevec is about 500,000 litres capacity, of course. So yes, 22,000, shockingly small number. I know that it's unlikely anybody got a 10 out of 10 tonight. And Connor Smith is saying, wow, not enough is right. I agree. I absolutely agree. Let's see how we did on the scores. 5 out of 10, Jaime is saying, Asshat saved me. Wow, fantastic. And Fraser Thistle, well done, Fraser. Managed a pass mark as well. Lassie is on an 8 out of 10. And Kilted Moose is on a 6 out of 10. A pass mark. Happy with that on his birthday. Many happy returns. 9 minutes left to your 50th, buddy. Can't wait to be raise a wee glass together. Many happy returns. Whiskey 101, Nick is saying 7 out of 10 and happy with a pass. Sugar Kitty on a 7 out of 10. And John Drinks is saying Sylvester McCoy out of David Tennant. What? Not sure I understand, John. Matt 69 is on 8 out of 10. Fantastic. Oh, and it jumps. But I'm looking for a 9. I'm looking for a 10. Sid Martin, 9 out of 10. Well done, Sid. Maybe you take the laurels tonight. David Keogh, 9 out of 10. Well done, David, as well. Joining Sid. Terrific stuff. Maybe it was a bit trickier than I thought. Lots of 8s, though. Peter Box, Hoyt, Andrew Pears. Gino Cremo, good to see you, Gino. Stewie Baby, good to see you, Stewie, on an 8 out of 10 as well. Fantastic. And Glenn Etsy, Klaus, is on 8 out of 10 too. That's a terrific. 8 out of 10 is a big score tonight, but it looks like Sid and David I've got the best tonight. No 10 out of 10s. Graham Fraser got a 9 as well. Well done, Graham. He's rolling his eyes at a 9 out of 10. Come on. Bruno Martins is saying, congrats for your 9 out of 10. Sugar Kitty. Peter Lee, you get a 10 out of 10 on the effort scale for sure. There you go. Do I get a 10 out of 10 for trying? Absolutely. And that's the greatest thing about the vPub quiz at the end. Just give yourself any score that you like. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day, as long as you find it fun and interesting. I've found tonight fun and interesting, and preparing and doing the research and working out what bottle I wanted to buy. I hinted last week that I was waiting on one bottle to be delivered to do tonight, and I ended up waiting on the Old Pulteney as well, but it was the Fettercairn I was most excited about. When I saw that paler bottle, when I saw it dropped in price, when I saw that it was natural colour and non-chill filtered, I thought, yes, this is what we're asking for. There's always another whiskey out there. Forget about it. If they double in price, if they go off the shelf, if you can't buy them anymore, care not a jot. There's always more whiskey. And I predict that in the future, short term, medium term, and longer term, there's going to be more whiskey than we've ever had in the past. I'm going to do my best to help us all enjoy it as much as we possibly can. I've enjoyed tonight. I hope that you guys have too. It's been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you. I'll, of course, be back again next week for another vPub. I don't know what the topic is yet because there's one I want to do. It was mentioned earlier tonight, but there's a couple of bottles that I think would enhance things a wee bit more, so I think I'll wait. So watch the social media feeds. If you follow me on Patreon, of course, you guys always get to know it first. You're the guys that this... You're the reason that this exists, of course. I'll raise this glass of delicious Fettercairn 16. I'm very pleased to have it. And I'll say that you're all very dearly loved. I'll look forward to hanging out with you next Thursday night. Thank you for joining me tonight. Slàinte. Happy birthday, Kilted Moose.